Good morning. With me, I have Attorney General Mike Hunter, Director of Corrections Scott Crow, and members of the legislature. These folks have diligently worked to find the most humane and swift way to resume capital punishment in the state of Oklahoma. It has been over 5 years since the state's last execution. I can't imagine the grief and loss of the families and friends that are still mourning the murder of their loved ones. I believe capital punishment is appropriate for the most heinous of crimes, and it is our duty as state officials to obey the laws of the state of Oklahoma by carrying out this somber task. This is why we are here to announce the state's plan to resume executions. There are over 25,000 inmates currently incarcerated in the state of Oklahoma, 47 of which have been found guilty by a jury of their peers for the most heinous of murders and are placed on death row. These individuals committed unspeakable acts and will be held accountable to the victims and those left behind to pick up the pieces. I appreciate Director Crow and Attorney General Hunter and their staff who have worked to update the protocol for capital punishment. I also appreciate the patience of those Oklahomans who have lost loved ones and have continued to wait for justice. Thank you, and I want to call up Attorney General Hunter now.
Thank you, Governor. I appreciate your commitment to this process. I want to echo the Governor's sentiments. Director Crow and his team have worked tirelessly to acquire the drugs that are necessary for the 3-drug protocol. I also appreciate everyone here on behalf of our efforts to support the victims of crimes, and these are the most horrific of crimes. The victims of these crimes no longer have a voice, and their loved ones continue to await justice. I think I can speak for everyone here when I say that there's no more serious or profound responsibility that we as state officials undertake than carrying out a death sentence. It is our obligation to discharge this responsibility in an effective and humane manner that adheres to the 8th Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. And it was with that same commitment and resolve that I stood before you in 2018 to announce our plan. At the time was to move forward with a new method of capital punishment, nitrogen hypoxia. We are working with the Department of Corrections to vigorously explore that as an option in the future, and we have made good progress towards that goal. But in the meantime, I want to say that we will continue our work on this method because, as Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito said in 2015, opponents of capital punishment are waging a guerrilla war against the death penalty with the goal of making it impossible for states to obtain execution drugs. And we want to be ready if that day comes. However, let's be clear. The 2015 law allowing the state to develop a method for nitrogen hypoxia specifically states that death sentences shall be carried out by nitrogen hypoxia only if the drugs for lethal injection are unavailable. My continued commitment when I speak to Oklahomans who remain tormented by the loss of their loved ones has been that we would use any route necessary and constitutionally valid to resume executions as expeditiously as possible. They have endured enough through the decades of waiting on the lengthy appeals process and the state's attempt to get the protocol right. To put it simply, they've waited too long. Because of the efforts of Director Crow and his team, we can finally tell the victims that their wait for justice is nearly over. In saying that, we are confident that there will be challenges by attorneys for death row inmates, but we are assured that any challenges to the updated three-drug protocol will clear the judicial process. I say this with confidence because lethal injection has been ruled as humane and has satisfied both the Constitution and the court system numerous times. The additions that we've made to the protocol simply add more checks and balances, more safeguards to the system to ensure that what has happened in the past won't happen again. The three drugs, midazolam, vicuronium bromide, and potassium chloride, are the same drugs in the updated protocol. They've been successful in the past, not only in Oklahoma, but in numerous other states. And they will continue to be just as effective as we continue with this method. Any issues with these drugs have always been connected with human error, not the efficacy of the drugs. Aside from our continued efforts to develop a method to carry out capital punishment with nitrogen hypoxia, several other recommendations have been adopted from the 2016 multi-county grand jury report, including a process which officials will be able to verify the drugs at every step in the process. Additional training for members of the execution teams is also included. Finally, with today's announcement, we have complied with the notice provisions of the joint stipulations, thus enabling the state to request execution dates for inmates who have exhausted their appeals after 150 days. As you can see, we have undertaken the necessary steps to once again begin to carry out our very solemn duty for the victims' families who wait for and expect justice to be carried out, and for Oklahomans who spoke loud and clear when they voted in 2016 to renew the state's commitment to capital punishment as a part of the state's Constitution. 5 years is too long. When asked, our answer to victims' families who await resolution can no longer be hopefully soon. This is not just delaying justice, it's delaying it outright. It is now my privilege to turn things over to Director Crow for his comments before we take question. I want to say that I'm privileged to have Speaker Wright and Chairman Kennedy here as part of this announcement. Director Crow.
Thank you, AG, our Chief Hunter. I appreciate it very much. I really just want to start to say this is a very, very important day for criminal justice in Oklahoma, simply because we are now to a point that we're able to carry out the orders of the courts, the orders of our juries, and to make things right with the victims of the families of the victims and the loved ones that have fallen because of various crimes. And so the Department of Corrections, this is a responsibility that as director and interim director I've taken very seriously. We went through diligent efforts to make sure that everything is in place, from the chemicals that are used in the three-drug protocol to the processes that are going to be used for training, and most importantly, the system of checks and balances to make sure that we are in fact carrying every piece of it out meticulously to ensure that the state of Oklahoma is very successful in our efforts with conducting executions moving forward. I think I would be remiss if I didn't take a minute to say how grateful I am for the patience of those loved ones and victims of family members as we work through this process to make sure that we can do executions in Oklahoma meticulously. And so moving forward, I am in the process of establishing teams that will be involved in the process. The selection of those teams is not something that I take lightly. It will be those individuals that I have the utmost confidence in to be able to do what it is that we need to do. And so, again, this is not something that the Department of Corrections has taken lightly. It's something that we are very, very serious about. It's something that the citizens of the state of Oklahoma can rest assured that we are going to do everything that we can to make sure that justice is carried out in Oklahoma in the manner in which it was prescribed. And so I appreciate the efforts of everyone that's been involved in this process. I appreciate the leadership of Governor Stitt and Attorney General Hunter. in making sure that as we went through the protocols and the processes that we did so in such a way that we improved on those things. And so again, this has been a team effort, and I appreciate all that were involved. Thank you.
So we'll be happy to take a few questions. We're constrained to some degree, given the fact that we are undoubtedly going to be involved in litigation around all this. So questions, please.
Have you set a date for the first execution? Who will it be?
No dates for future executions can be set until 150 days has passed, and at that point, our office will request that the Court of Criminal Appeals will set, we will request them to set execution dates.
How many people are eligible for executions right now?
There are 47 inmates on death row currently in Oklahoma.
How many have exhausted their appeals and would be eligible at the end of that 5 months?
Let's see, is it 27, Jennifer? 26? Answer is 26.
Do you anticipate,
Barbara?
Do you anticipate that you'll do more than one execution in a day?
So that scheduling is going to be determined with the Department of Corrections. I would hesitate to make any kind of predictions about timing, Director.
Yes, sir.
So, not in a position to answer that question decisively.
Does the state already have the midazolam, or have you just secured a supply for it?
So state law protects the sourcing of the 3 drugs, and all I can tell you is that the state has secured access to the 3 drugs necessary for the protocol.
How many protocols? I mean, how many executions do you believe you can carry out with the supply that you have accessed?
Not in a position to answer that question with any kind of certainty. Suffice to say that there are sufficient drugs to begin the process of scheduling executions with the Court of Criminal Appeals. Back here and then back over here. Excuse me.
Executions plural.
Yes.
Sufficient drugs to do executions plural.
Yes.
You mentioned some of the past errors are being due to human mistakes, and you mentioned additional training. Can you go into some detail about what that might be?
So my understanding is that the protocol is going to be made available. Alex, the protocol is available, and it's going to be on the DOC website?
Yes.
Mr. Director? So that's the best way to answer your question, is that there have been changes to the protocol, and those changes are a consequence of the multi-county grand jury report, as well as the work that DOC's done to perfect the process.
Specifically about training, though, I mean, you're talking about the human part of that. Can you, without going into it right now, can you talk about that part of it?
Director, you want to talk about training?
I definitely can. The issue with the protocol, there's been minor changes to the protocol, but the thing that we are really focused on is making sure that the individuals that are involved in carrying it out have actually been trained, and that there's a process of checks and balances to make sure that each of the requirements in the protocol is done exactly in accordance with the way that it's specified. And so the biggest process here is a system of checks and balances, or accountability, just to make sure that every piece of the protocol is followed exactly as it's written in the policy.
I believe one of the big recommendations from all these death penalty review commissions, maybe the multi-county grand juries, to not have double executions on the same day, because it was very stressful on staff. Are you saying you're not sure you're going to follow that recommendation?
At this point, I would not like to, I really don't want to comment on that. I can tell you that we are looking at the overall, because of the number that we have, we're looking at the overall complexity of that situation, and we're developing a schedule for Governor Stitt and Attorney General Hunter to establish a more definitive game plan moving forward.
Director, I don't know if this would be best for you or for General Hunter, but for Oklahomans who will hear about this today and wonder, are we ever going to see another botched execution in the state again? What do you say to reassure them, without going into so many of the details of training, what do you say to reassure them?
The reassurance is that I can assure the state of Oklahoma that we have established a system of checks and balances through a protocol that I feel very confident in, and establishing a team of individuals that will be involved in executing those protocols to make sure that there are no mistakes. That's the reassurance that I can provide to the citizens of the state of Oklahoma.
Do you think we'll see an execution before the end of 2020?
I really am not in a position to comment on that at this point.
Why are you still continuing to work on the nitrogen side of it? I mean, is there still stuff to be done on that? If you've got an adequate supply on the lethal injection side, why waste your time, so to say, on that part of it?
I'll take it. So, you know, I quoted Justice Alito earlier. the efforts of those who oppose the death penalty to essentially close off access to the drugs is something almost every state's dealing with. Into the future, it is it's not a certainty, but it's a probability that we won't be able to get the drugs. And so ensuring that, consistent with our responsibilities, that we have an alternative form of capital punishment is just being responsible. And so good progress has been made to complete an architecture for the nitrogen hypoxia method, but we're not there yet.
Is there any discussion on going to the two other alternatives beyond the nitrogen?
No, sir. So questions over here.
Did you have to go to more?
Okay, Barbara and then Don.
Did you have to go to more than one source to get the drugs?
Can't comment on that. Don?
What's the status of the nitrogen hypoxia protocol?
It's the nitrogen hypoxia protocol is on hold given the fact that we're able to acquire the drugs. But as I've said, DOC is continuing with efforts in conjunction with our office to finalize the architecture that's necessary to carry out the nitrogen hypoxia protocol, but we're not there yet.
You've indicated that the state may have to actually construct the machine itself. Is that still your?
All I can say is that we're working with DOC to finalize the protocol and make sure it complies with 8th Amendment strictures. A few more questions.
Just in that release, you say the nitrogen, when appropriate would be when the drugs are not available. Is that the?
That's state law.
That would be the parameter of when.
State law requires that the 3-drug protocol be used for executions. If the 3-drug protocol, if the drugs are not available, then it defaults to nitrogen hypoxia. Just a few more questions.
Was it hard to find the drugs for execution?
Can't
You
comment.
can't say the source, but was it hard to find them? Because that was an issue a few years ago when you had to press.
Well, former Director Albaugh made those comments. They're in the public domain, so I would just refer you to comments that he's made in the past.
Having nitrogen as the backup, do you have any concerns that Oklahoma would be the first state in the U.S. to use that if we start to run out of those other?
Am I concerned? The reason that we're taking the time that we're taking on it is to make sure we get it right. But as I've said in the past, the nitrogen hypoxia protocol is, we believe, a humane and 8th Amendment appropriate alternative because it is commonly used in states and countries that allow for assisted suicide. So before we conclude, Governor, do you have any closing remarks? Mr. Speaker, Chairman, Director Crow?
No, sir.
Thank you all very much for coming today.